Top 10 win in the books. That major hurdle cleared, but no time for letdown with a trip to Camp Randall. Welcome into the Voice of College Football, our Ohio State Buckeyes live show right here on the Buckeyes channel. Please like and subscribe. Enjoy the content. If you have yet to stop by at any other time, give us a look, check us out, join the conversation, and dive in. We got Steve Hellwagon right next to me, Bucknuts 247 Sports. We appreciate Steve being here, taking time out of his busy week each and every week. You see, we've done this 238 times. Ditto for Tony Gerdeman. Buckeye Huddle. That's the website, buckeyehuddle.com. Buckeye Weekly, which is Buckeye Daily this time of year, and College Football Playbook. So Buckeye Weekly, the podcast. Check out Tony's work. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing great. Well.
Steve, it seems to me as though this happens all over college football, not just related to Ohio State, but since they are one of the big boys, they get targeted that this is a huge game. This is a massive game. Let's see how good you can play against this team. And then once it happens, well, they really weren't that good. And this seems to be tagged because of the Penn State offensive performance in that game, more given to the Penn State ineptness than the Ohio State dominance on that side of the ball.
Yeah, it was very much inept. I have to say that. It was so inept that in the third quarter, I got up, milled around. I think I came down and visited with Tony and Kevin a little bit in the press box, said my hellos, went down to the Penn State side of the press box, said hello to Mark Brennan, who joined us last week on the show, and the people I know down in that end. I went down, got a celebratory box of popcorn. I mean, there was no threat by Penn State's offense in that game. Their defense was probably a 9.5 out of 10, as was the Ohio State defense. Two great defenses, but Penn State's offense they had no downfield threat. They couldn't run the ball, and they couldn't convert third down. So when you put all that into a blender and shake it up, you get one touchdown and two field goals or whatever it was that they had. I mean, this was a team that was averaging 44 points per game coming in, and they were held to 12. So I think a lot of it's the Ohio State defense just played lights out. And you had a young guy, Jermaine Matthews, at cornerback, filled in, did a bang-up job. You had young guys, Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, filling in on the defensive line. And each of them had a sack. JT Tuimoloau had a sack. Just a defense that really came together. It was a command performance, and this was what you wanted to see. I think Ohio State, again, comes out of this game, and you kind of scratch your head because Ohio State, for years under Ryan Day and Urban, won these games on the basis of just overwhelming you with their offense. And that's really not the case anymore. It's kind of like Marvin Harrison Jr. is one guy holding up the planet right now like this. And, everybody else is thriving because he's the one there holding up the planet. So they got to find, obviously it would help if they get Travion Henderson and Emeka Egbuka in particular back in the lineup this week. Might look and feel a little bit better, even if they're not quite 100% just yet. But, a lot of ways to look at it. I prefer to look at it that was a very good Penn State team that they played, and they took care of them. They eventually pulled away in the fourth quarter and had a 2-touchdown lead and won by 8 points. So I take that as a win.
This one reminded me of the 2007 Michigan game where I don't know if that was like a 14-3 game or whatever, but Ohio State was never threatened because Michigan couldn't throw the ball because Chad Henne had a bum shoulder, and there was just no threat there. So you didn't ever necessarily need enough points, too many points or many points to get the win. But watching this one from the press box, Ohio State left some points on the board, and I'm not just talking about the 4th and 2, that one, or the muffing a punt essentially and losing a possession, but they had receivers running open. They had some open receivers that Kyle McCord didn't hit, and they could have put some more points on the board to make this one even uglier than what it was. I knew immediately afterwards, though, and I think we probably said it in the post game, that this is one of those games where in the SEC everybody would be lauding the defense, but when it happens in the Big Ten, they talk about how bad the offenses are. And so I think we've kind of seen some revisionism there regarding that sort of talk afterwards. And we saw it again after Notre Dame. It's like, well, how good can they be when they don't even put 11 guys on a defense and you're trying to diminish it? But, both of those teams are still ranked in the top 15 and they're still going to, beat some teams. But I think Ohio State's defense was obviously way too much for Penn State's offense. And Steven said they're scoring 44 points a game. They're only scoring 34 in Big Ten. So like they had built a lot of their stuff on Delaware and UMass. And this was much more representative of what they were. But obviously Ohio State took it to another level. And there was just the secondary is playing so well right now. And if Drew Aller was more accurate, there probably would have been more interceptions. But because a lot of the passes weren't near anybody, you can't intercept those. Leaving that game, I all season long I've been saying Penn State was going to beat Michigan, and then watching Penn State the past week and seeing them more and more and more, I would like to retract my previous statements on the future matchup between the Wolverines and Nittany Lions.
There seem to be top 5 and 10 teams across the country that are squeaking by the likes of Houston, Arizona State, UCF, and those games seem to be judged and evaluated similar to Ohio State, controlling the game for the better portion of it against Penn State. And yes, Penn State may not quite be as good as we thought, maybe, but I thought that was a solid effort. Again, Kyle McCord, yes, he came out and he made the first 5 throws in a manner in which you would expect, nothing crazy good. But then all of a sudden, for the next 15 throws, he was all over the place, missing guys on obvious slants when they were wide open, throwing a ball to Carnell Tate down the seam where he really needed to. Man, Tate had his guy, and he was breaking free from him. Throw it out there, get it out there. And he tried to gun it and threw it about 5 feet behind him.
There's another one. There's another one where he's throwing to Tate in the end zone, and Marvin Harrison is completely alone over the middle of the field. Like there's no defender with him, and he's just running a crossing route and just things like that. That I think the more Kyle plays, he'll be fine, and he has great stretches, but there are also still the valleys that Ohio State is dealing with right now.
All right, I guess we'll stay with the offense. And Mayan Williams was a battering ram in this one. Not that he was picking up too much yardage, but at least able to move the sticks in key situations. And again, 62 yards on 24 carries doesn't seem like it's going to be a formula for down the road. But at the same time, there was some level of effectiveness at times, as long as he didn't try to bounce it wide against that defense.
Yeah, they ran was it an option play with Mayan? I think they ran, and it was blocked perfectly. And had it been Dallan Hayden, it would have been a 20-yard run. But with Mayan, he got back to the line of scrimmage, and he got 4 yards, and then they all closed in. And it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, waiting on him to get out there to the edge. And I like Mayan. I think Mayan has a place on this team, but he's not your every down back. Can't be. And that was proven against a good defense. I mean, he'll trample whoever. Now, maybe not Wisconsin this week, but Michigan State, Rutgers, Minnesota, he'll trample those people. But, good teams, no. Not good teams with speed, good team speed, not going to happen. So they desperately need Henderson back healthy and playing like he's capable. He's the only chance they have to establish the run game against a good team. And again, establish isn't even the right word, because we saw it against Notre Dame, a bunch of 1 and 2 yard runs, and then he breaks off a 60-yarder. And you're like, oh, we've got a run game. Well, for one play you did. So he at least gives them the hope that he might hit one big one, but there's no consistency in the run game. They were behind down distance against Notre Dame with him. So, all day long. And that's why they only scored 17 points. So, it's It's not a national championship offense right now. It's a national championship defense, which has been the flip of what we've seen the last several years. I'm not sure what they can do in the short yardage situations and running the football to bring it up to code, but it's not where it needs to be right now.
You nailed that option pitch to the left because there was nobody in the TV screen when he caught the football, and I thought, big gainer.
Great call, blocked perfectly, because they don't really run that play, so you never expect to see it. And particularly with the quarterback, with Kyle McCord and the ball in his hands. I mean, my God, he was going to keep that? No, he wasn't. So, especially not now. Jesus, with no Devin Brown as the safety net, you have a Tristan Gebbia who's not played, I don't believe, one snap so far this season. So he's now the backup, it would seem. They kind of flirted with the idea that Lincoln Kienholz might get in there now on the goal line instead of Devin Brown. He's got 4 games he can play and still keep his red shirt. They have 5 regular season and 3 postseason potentially. So 8 games left, if they go the distance, and he can play in 4 of those. But I think that's pound foolish to put somebody sight unseen. I would do that in the fourth quarter of the Rutgers game when it's 44-7, something like that, or the Michigan State game when it's 56-3, in the fourth quarter. That's when I would put Lincoln Kienholz in the game for the first time, not at Wisconsin, where it's going to be extremely loud. And, we can get into what Wisconsin brings, but that's not the time and the place I would experiment with Lincoln Kienholz playing his first football. No way, no how.
And I'm a little surprised that Ryan Day, not that I believe it, but he said they would. Right. And I would if you were to lose Kyle McCord for the rest of the season, Devin Brown for the rest of the season, maybe you hand it over to the true freshman because he'll grow and get better and his ceiling is higher. But Tristan Gebbia is, 7th-year guy, has been a starting quarterback. Ryan Day said that they'll compete this week to see who the backup is. I fully expect that to be Gebbia, and I don't expect Lincoln Kienholz to be a red zone threat because, as Ryan Day said, they need to be able to run the ball and pick it up on 4th and 2 regardless. And so if that is your thought, then you don't need to be throwing a freshman out there. And one of the differences between Devin Brown and Lincoln Kienholz, Devin Brown's like 6'3", 220. Lincoln Kienholz is a true freshman, like 6'2", a $195 right now, something like that. So he's definitely athletic and he can move around and he's going to be very good in doing that. But I would think you would see a wildcat situation before you would see Lincoln Kienholz out there as somebody who is going to just run around and try to make something happen or equate the numbers, as Urban Meyer would say, with the blockers and the defense. I would expect a wildcat, maybe chip or something like that. But, getting Travion Henderson back would be big just because of the home run potential and also because they refused to play Dallan Hayden. So you've got to find somebody who can run the ball. And, while what Travion lacks in consistency makes up for with that 150-yarder that gets the job done. But even that Notre Dame game, I think I've said it here before, was his least efficient game of the season in terms of success rate on his carries, because I think only 3 of his 14 carries were successful in that they got half of the distance needed on first down, 70% of the distance needed on second down, or all of the distance needed on third or fourth down, only 3 of his 14. Meanwhile, Dallan Hayden's game against Purdue was the most successful game any Ohio State running back has had this year. And I'm not even going to go back and look at Chipper Mayan in the last week or two because there's no way neither of those guys were even anywhere close to that. And Mayan had some good moments, but then it just gets shut down and then that's it. And for a while we were seeing the old Mayan Williams, the 2022 Mayan Williams. And then after maybe 3 or 4 carries, we saw the 2023 Mayan Williams the rest of the game. So it's not a great situation right now. And it does seem to me, Steve, tell me if you agree with this, when Ryan Day was asked maybe after the game and then again on Tuesday, why isn't Dallan Hayden playing on after the game? He said, that's Tony Alford's call, but we're going to go back and look and see if that's the right call. To me, he seems to be asking, maybe wondering as well, like, why isn't Dallan Hayden playing? Even though one of the reasons why was because of his maybe not so great at pass protection. But then immediately to start the game, you see Chip Trayanum giving up a sack on a blitz. So I wonder if Ryan Day is going to maybe start saying, let's get Dallan Hayden out there. Redshirt be damned.
Yeah, I kind of had to re-listen to his comment about Dallan Hayden yesterday, kind of like the way I translated it and the way that I transcribed it was that he's saying we are going to give Dallan a shot to get in there and play this week against Wisconsin. It was kind of the way I listened to it. And that would run counter to the idea that they're planning to still redshirt him. I think they realize that they are 7 games into 2023 and they don't have the kind of playmaking they need at that position, especially if Henderson is not 100%, to expect that they're going to run the table. And 2026 is great. We could all be dead in 2026. If the world affairs continue the way they're going, there may not be any 2026. So let's win it today, is kind of my feeling. And this is a guy I think that can help you win it today. Now, is he going to go up to Michigan and rush for 100 yards? No, I'm not saying that. I don't know that they'll, as a team, if they can get 125 yards rushing in that game, I would consider that a path to victory. So, that's still a month off in the future, and you hope that they can get, some consistency going with the run game starting this week. So that was interesting. You brought up Trayanum. He started the game, and then I don't know what stage of the first quarter that play was where the defensive end or the outside linebacker just went right around him and sacked the quarterback. And it wasn't long. I have to get my sheet out after that Mayan Williams came in and basically played the entire second and third quarter with no sight of Chip Trayanum at all until they ran the tread off of Mayan Williams essentially by the end of the third quarter. And he had stopped being effective in any way, shape, or form. And then they summoned Chip Trayanum back into the game to play the fourth quarter. I wonder if Tony Alford just benched him because he allowed that sack. I'll go back and look and see exactly what the timing was on all that. But
I have it here if you want it.
Yeah, if you go for it. But yeah, did he play at all after he gave up the sack until the fourth quarter?
Well, in the second Ohio State's second drive is when this happened. He carried the ball, then McCord threw an incompletion, then he got sacked. And the next time Ohio State had the ball, it was Mayan Williams rushing. And then let's see. And then Trayanum came back in the third quarter on the third Ohio State possession. So
yeah, so late third quarter, he gives up a sack with about 7 minutes to go in the first quarter, doesn't seem to play the last, they got the ball back with 5 minutes to go in the first quarter, doesn't seem to play there or the second quarter. And as you said, it was the third drive of the third quarter with 5 minutes to go in the third quarter, and the score was still 10-6. I think they realized, boys, we're in a real football game here. We got to get something going. And that was the drive. They took it all the way down to the 2-yard line and didn't score. Mayan went in on the goal line, and that play on the goal line. Well, it was they got it down to the 9, Trayanum for 3 yards to the 6. Then they brought in Devin Brown, and he got 5 yards. And so down to the 1-yard line, that's the one where he got folded up and injured his ankle. And so then it's 3rd and goal at the 1, and they lined up with like 4 tight ends. If you count Montgomery as like the 4th tight end out there, with Stover, G. Scott, Montgomery, and one more, big guy out there. They had 2 of them on each side, and Stover was the wingback on the right. Stover didn't block Dominic DeLuca, number 0, and he came in untouched, shot essentially between the wingback and the tight end, got right through there and swallowed up Mayan in the backfield for a 1-yard loss. And then on the fourth down play, McCord, he has to play quarterback now because Brown's injured. McCord's not going to run it. I mean, they seem averse to running the quarterback sneak, although now it's 4th and goal to 2. You would not sneak it necessarily from the 2-yard line. And he throws that pass to Carnell Tate, who's kind of coming across the field, and throws it to it. It's kind of like the David Boston play in the Rose Bowl 1,000 years ago. He's kind of running like this and kind of catches it like this and is supposed to turn upfield and score. That's what David Boston did. That's not what Carnell Tate did. He got swallowed up at the 1-yard line, not even close to the goal line or the 2-yard line. And, that Woody, that painted thing at the end of the field, you throw the ball into that. That's where you throw the ball into, is the painted thing at the end of the field if you want to score. And somebody remarked, that pattern needs to be run in the end zone. And I don't know, they can't score down there. They just, and that's a broad whatever. But see, that ruins a drive where he threw a pass to Harrison for 16 yards and one to Stover for 30. They were clicking. They had Penn State on their heels, and they don't put that in the end zone. They hit 2 nice pass plays on that drive to get in position, and doesn't work out.
When they play the Hell's Bells music on 3rd down for Ohio State's defense, they should probably also play that when Ohio State gets down to like the 15.
Gong, gong. Well, Kevin says, that red zone is like poison for them. You're in the red zone, that's poison. So,
yeah, maybe just go with Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I hate that song, but it would be apropos. You get down to the 15 or 20, and then you just start chucking it into the end zone. You don't want to get too close. Maybe you just that's Marvin Harrison territory.
You get down to the 2, you take a false start or something like that, move it back a little bit to clear up some room for you.
Speaking of injuries, do we have any guesses? Because I know, of course, the information is not completely out there. Emeka Buka and on down the line.
Well, Day said that he expects everybody to be back, hopes to have everybody back. I don't expect Emeka Buka back just yet. Travion Henderson, they said he was close. Denzel Burke, they said that was a game time type of thing, just not quite there yet. So I would expect those 2 guys to be back. Is that the extent of the big 3, right? It's just those 3 that we're talking about.
Those are the only 3 at this point.
And I think you'll continue to see Carnell Tate step up more and more. I think he played the same number of snaps as Xavier Johnson last week, as they both kind of replace Emeka, and we'll see. Day, like I said, Day says everybody should be back, but I'd be shocked.
My last thought on Dallan Hayden is he's played 2 full games against mid-level Big Ten defenses, Maryland and Purdue, and he looked phenomenal in both games. And then he played a 9-carry game against arguably the best defense in the country and produced more rushing yardage by far than anybody else on the field. Limited action, wasn't like he carved them up for 8 yards a carry, but it was 4.5 plus. Even if he's as awful as people think he is, or he may be in pass pro, I would give it 2 series a game to even see, okay, even if it's obvious that when he's in the game, he's running the football, or he's some kind of decoy and we got to get the ball out of the quarterback's hand quickly and it limits our offense. I'll go back to, and I know you don't want to play a full game tipping your hand, 70% on every play, but a couple series a game to see, hey, maybe even if we're playing at a strategic disadvantage, that Dallan Hayden is good enough to outplay that. Let's go back to the old Vince Lombardi style of play that exactly what's coming. We're going to run the Packer sweep, but you can't stop it. Now, obviously not to that extreme, but I just, the whole red shirt, to Steve's point, I'm not going to go to his end of the spectrum. Hopefully not, but yes, you are Ohio State. You're playing for a national championship basically every season. If this guy's your best back, run him.
He had 3 100-yard games last year as a true freshman. That's the same number that Travion Henderson had when he was outstanding as a true freshman in 2021. As you said, that Georgia game, is nine carries for 43 yards. Like, that was as good as just about anybody had done against Georgia, averaging 5 yards a carry there. And he had 100 yards against Indiana, then another 100 against Maryland, and the game against Georgia. And sandwiched in there is like 2 carries for 7 yards against Michigan, when everybody was like, why isn't Dallan Hayden playing? You take that Michigan game out of there, and in those 3 games, Indiana, Maryland, and Georgia, I think he rushed for like 290 yards. And yet, 2 carries again for 7 yards. Maybe that was the changeup that Ohio State came up with to combat Michigan stealing signs. They just didn't play their best running back.
I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
All right, folks, Buckeyes Live right here each and every week. We appreciate Steve being here, and Tony. Catch Steve on Bucknuts 247 Sports. Tony at Buckeye Weekly. That's the podcast, just about each and every day. What have you been talking about here, Tony, this week?
Well, quite a bit of the Michigan talk, of course, as you might expect. We're even trying to talk about what Ohio State is saying, but because we're doing some live shows, like the conversation, just the comments keep coming in about Michigan. So that's where things are mostly been to this point. And we're going to talk about it later again today, and we'll have another show dropping at some point this afternoon, early evening.
Steve, we are 6 days away from the first release of the college football playoff rankings. Ryan, thank you so much for the super chat contribution. Should Ohio State be ranked number 1 in the first CFP poll?
I think there is some sentiment that they've got 2 of the better wins of any team in the country right now. Georgia and Michigan certainly have not beaten anybody of that stature, even one team of that stature, let alone 2. Florida State, Oklahoma, I guess, how do you want to quantify the teams that they've played? Oklahoma certainly beat Texas when they were a top 10 team. So I'm not sure how you really want to go about it. There aren't a lot of undefeated teams left. They're kind of falling by the wayside, one by one. Louisville, North Carolina, all checked out. The Pac-12's cannibalizing itself. As Washington, I think, is the only one left out there. Washington's got a great win over Oregon, but they got to keep going, certainly. So I don't know. I think you could make the case for that. It's just, if you watch them play, you wouldn't think they're the number 1 team in the country. I mean, compared, to some of these other teams. Georgia, I've continued to have number 1 on my ballot for the Super 16 with the old, Ric Flair line, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And they just continue to put one win after another up on the board, although some of them haven't been all that impressive. To only beat, Auburn by 7 points with a touchdown with 3 minutes to go. And Auburn, they're not very good. So even though they're probably 4-3 or 5-2, whatever their record is, but
3-4.
3-4. So, it's apples to oranges comparisons, and Michigan still hasn't played anybody, will not play anybody till week 10 against Penn State. And then it's Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State, all back loaded for them. And, you can do whatever you want. It's all going to come out in the wash when they all play each other. And, if we want to delve into this Michigan thing, I think if they're able to connect some dots here, which, we have to take the reporting with a little bit of a grain of salt. We don't know who sourced all this, and does all this really hold water? Are Pete Demel and the Yahoo guys and the ESPN guys all doing the investigative work for the NCAA and the Big Ten on this? Can they show their math and say definitively this Connor Stallions person bought tickets at all these places and sent people there, and they say they've got surveillance tape of these people taking video, and then magically this low-level recruiting staffer is standing next to the 2 coordinators Channel 10, Adam King from here in Columbus, posted a video shot from the field of C.J. Stroud going up the line of scrimmage and doing that, and then turning to the sideline to get the signal. And in the background of the shot, Connor Stallions and the defensive coordinator, as soon as the signal is made and they recognize, this is so sophisticated, they even know which guy has the legitimate signal in that moment, because there's 4 people over there, doing all the signals and everything. They know which guy has the legitimate signal. Connor Stallions says something, the defensive coordinator says something, and then 20 people on the sideline go like this, which, they're yelling pass. It's going to be a pass. It's a pass. So that means don't worry about, selling out for the run, play the pass. And, stealing signs is not the problem. The problem is the spying. The spying is the problem. And if the spying comes back that the coaches were aware of it, they're using ill-gotten gains to win football games. And that to me strikes at the heart of the competition. They have short-circuited the competition with this cheating that they have allegedly taken part of, and they're going to say, well, we had no idea he was going to these lengths to break these codes. And I think that's a bit naive to believe that, because at some point somebody asked, well, how are you getting this intelligence? Somebody has to ask that question, don't they? And better yet, if he is submitting receipts as a low-level, not well-paid recruiting analyst, and the University of Michigan or Jim Harbaugh or a coach or somebody is reimbursing him for the thousands and thousands of dollars of travel and tickets and everything else that he embarked on here, that's lack of institutional control. And that could be a several-year postseason ban, I would think. They may have to give back wins, be outlawed this year, maybe next year, and probably show cause for a bunch of people. And this is a can of worms, and it seems to me like they are holding Michigan, like in Lion King, is holding this guy up. He is your culprit. We are all not culpable. Well, that doesn't fly, because the head coach is presumed to know everything under his auspices. So that's my 2 cents on that. And if they take action against Michigan this year, then all Ohio State has to do is win the next 4 games. They're in the Big Ten championship game. Figure that's a walkover. They're in the playoff, regardless of what happens against Michigan. They could lose that game 44-0, and people will say, "Oh, it's tainted." Whatever. It's a loss, but they're still going to Indianapolis and probably going to beat whoever comes out of the West. At 12-1, you're in the playoff.
I think so much of this has already been tainted, because you don't have to prove anything like beyond a shadow of a doubt at this point, because the public opinion is that all of these things sure line up pretty well, and they look exactly how cheating would look if you were cheating.
If you were actually trying to cheat.
This is what it would look like. And if you're trying to get, or if you're trying to get caught at cheating, this is also what it would look like. And then
this is very ham-handed.
The mental gymnastics to think that Jim Harbaugh would have no idea, like, that none of this is happening, that this is happening around him, when, Connor Stallions is also talking to Jim Harbaugh on the sidelines. And if the players know and the coaches know, how does the head coach not know? So all of this it looks very, very, very bad. And I know Michigan fans are like, well, you can't prove this in a court of law, or how are you going to prove this in a court of law? It's like, this isn't a court of law. This is the NCAA. This is the Big Ten. This is now you're not just scouting Big Ten games. We had confirmation that he bought tickets for a Clemson game. He bought tickets to the previous 2 big SEC championship games. Like, they've gone beyond the Midwest. So now you're going to bring in the SEC. You're going to bring in the ACC in terms of, hey, we want answers. We don't want to have to, why should we have to deal with this? Like, we need a response immediately. And I think Adam Rittenberg has reported that the Big Ten doesn't have to wait for the NCAA. They could have a speedy response to this. I'm not expecting anything because in terms of like right now, because it is so unprecedented. But as I keep saying, what Michigan is alleged to have done and what Counter Stallions sure seems to have been doing is wholly unprecedented. So why wouldn't there be an unprecedented speed of punishment that goes right along with it? And I can't wait to talk to the College Football Playoff Committee Tuesday night to see what they have to say about it. And I don't. I just keep going over in my mind. I don't want to be an Ohio State reporter asking that question. I'm hoping the national reporters will ask it because Ohio State as a topic of its own is also something that I will be writing about, and talking about, and wanting to know about, especially to get back to Ryan Daw's question. Based on the AP poll and the coaches poll, they should be number one in the college football playoff poll, but we don't know how that committee is going to feel about Penn State and Notre Dame at this point. But I want to know what the committee has to say about Michigan. And they can't hide behind it's an ongoing investigation. They're not the ones being investigated. They have nothing to do with the investigation. I want to know how they feel about their thoughts on, hey, you've got this cloud over Michigan. Are you just ignoring that? Or would you want that in your playoff? Would you want that? And would you want to have that possibility of them winning and then finding out that there was ample cheating going on? Or do you even want that in your playoff?
Yeah, I think that they're eligible until such time that they're not eligible. So I think you have to
answer that question.
You have to grade them on the merit of what they've put on the field. And I think they're certainly in the discussion for number one, I would think, or two or three, looking at the metrics across the board, forgetting the fact that the teams that they've played have been total dog crap. So I don't know. I think they're going to be ranked in the top three. No question about it. I think they'll have some tough questions that they'll need to answer regarding that. Tony Petitti seems like a really no-nonsense kind of guy. I got to talk to him up at the Big Ten basketball media days just a couple weeks ago. He seems like a really good common sense type person. And I think he would be the first one to tell you if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And I think that in this case, Michigan, with them being in an open week this week with no game, I would think and I would hope that whoever is leading this charge with this investigation with the NCAA and the Big Ten, that they were on campus this week interviewing everybody involved and getting forensic evidence off the computers and the hard drives and surveillance and whatever else, and getting to the bottom of it. This was the week with them not playing a game this week. Michigan can't say, well, we're too busy to stop and talk to you about this. There's no game this week. Now the coaches were probably all sent out of town on recruiting, but I know we want to get to Nick talking about Wisconsin, but that, to me, this was the week to get to the bottom of it. And I hope by the end of this week, we have some findings of at least some evidence so that a common sense resolution to this can be made.
Yeah, Koff, we'll get to your super chat. We appreciate it. One quick statement out of me, then we will get to the Wisconsin preview with Nick, is that just aside from this particular case, just as it regards cheating, there is only one purpose of cheating. So we've had a ton of Michigan fans comment on here, and most of them have been really fair and objective as is reasonable, and have been really good about taking this seriously and so forth. But there are tons of people out there. Well, they're so much better than everyone they play. They don't need to cheat. This is stupid. They're so much better. Why do they need to do that? This isn't helping them at all. Then don't do it. There is only one purpose to cheating. That's to change a result. That's the only reason you cheat.
It's like Watergate. Richard Nixon had that thing on lock, was going to win in a landslide either way, and they had the hubris to spy on the opposition, and the cover-up was what did them all in. I mean, if they had just come clean and whatever, then maybe wouldn't have turned out the way that it did. But this is a version of Watergate, in my opinion.
All right. On Saturday night, we've got Ohio State traveling to Camp Randall Stadium to take on the Wisconsin Badgers. They've handled this series for the last decade. It's kind of hard to believe for many of us been watching Ohio State-Wisconsin games for a long, long time, because Wisconsin seems like this. Wow, this is a death trap. There have been many lost seasons at Camp Randall Stadium. We got Nick Osen here from Wisconsin Badgers 247 Sports. Nick, we appreciate you being here.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for having me. A big time game coming up this Saturday.
Yeah, and speaking of officiating and so forth, officials in Iowa City gave you a bit of a reprieve in the Western Division race. So now Wisconsin again controls its own destiny. Your thoughts about the Western Division race going forward? Then I'll turn it over to Steve and Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. That was really one of the kind of crazier endings, calls, or, however you really want to look at it within that Iowa game. And I remember myself and other media members were live in Champaign, covering the Wisconsin game, obviously. And we saw that Cooper DeJean had kind of registered a punt return touchdown. And so we're like, all right, looks like both teams are going to kind of pick up wins this week. And then it was quickly wiped off. I think that it's really interesting. I still think the Badgers are a better team. I just think that they kind of played a little bit into Iowa's style, or I guess not kind of following how Wisconsin should maybe usually play against Iowa to kind of win that game a couple weeks ago here in Madison, which was really interesting. But I think it's really just going to come down to QB play. I think it's obvious, but right now both teams are kind of playing their backups. Due to injuries. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see if Tanner Mordecai does come back, but Braden Locke has looked great. Deacon Hill for Iowa, maybe not so great at times. I think they probably have a little bit of an easier schedule, does Iowa, but both teams have very winnable games in November. So I personally, guys, I see this going down to the last week of the college football regular season.
Yeah.
I know Ohio State fans will be Go ahead, Steve.
Go ahead, Jane. Go ahead.
I was going to say the Ohio State fans will be rooting for Wisconsin every week except for this one, because of the tiebreaker that goes on if there should be a three-way tie with in the Big Ten East. So tell us about the quarterback then, because I believe Braden Locke, who I believe he went to the same high school as Jackson Smith-Njigba out of Rockwall, Texas. So Ohio State fans would recognize that. But redshirt freshman, I believe. What are we going to see from him?
Yeah, so Braden Locke, he played like the second half against Iowa after Tanner Mordecai went out. And then he got his first start at Illinois, first start for the Badgers, first start in college football. And guys, I really came away quite impressed. I think he's somebody a little shorter than Tanner Mordecai, maybe not as quick as Mordecai was, really kind of a dual threat, but Braden Locke is very cerebral. He kind of prides himself on that, just how much time he puts in studying. He's got a good arm. He's a great decision maker. And I think the key that you really need to know this season is he's got a lot of familiarity with Phil Longo's air raid offense. High school, he ran a very similar offense. And as a freshman, before transferring to Wisconsin, obviously he was a true freshman then, he was under Mike Leach, one of the top air raid guys that's really associated with kind of much of his time there and that program, obviously. So I think he's made it pretty seamless coming in. There are some learning curves, maybe sitting a little bit long in a pocket here and there, not feeling something. But overall, I think he's impressed. I think the team has really rallied around him. And again, one start and one win so far on the road for the young Braden Locke.
Tanner Mordecai, as I understand it, he broke his hand against Iowa. Is it his throwing hand? And is there any talk at all that he would be able to come back and play this week? Or are they hoping within 2 or 3 weeks that he would be able to play again? Just what is the update, or as much as you guys been led to believe where things stand with him?
Yeah, so unfortunately for Tanner, it is his throwing hand. I'm not a doctor, know for sure, but if it wasn't, I think he would have been given it a shot. It actually happened in that Iowa game, and then he was trying to play another play, and he was kind of motioning to the sidelines, I can't throw, I can't grip the ball. And that evidently, was I believe a full break in his right hand, in his throwing hand. I would be, shell shocked if you see him anytime soon, like this
Mhm.
week. But we were kind of told, and this kind of lines up from what I've heard a little bit, just kind of trying to ask around. I think there's potentially some optimism for a return eventually,
Yeah.
but for the next week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, like going into mid to late November, I think it's the Braden Locke show. And what I found really interesting over the weekend, it's not a shocking thing, kind of being around these kids and knowing how they operate, but Braden and Tanner are very close. They've been really close off the field. They've really supported each other. And I think it's a great thing. It's a tough spot for Mordecai, his likely last season of college football, kind of a fringe draft pick type guy. And I think it's really cool that he's been so supportive of Braden, and Locke has not shied away from giving Tanner really some credit and some praise the last week and a half.
Ches Malusi, I saw he didn't play against Illinois, but he has 300 yards this year. Is he out? What's his status? I guess because he and Allen together make one of the very good running back tandems around, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. I think that honestly is one of the best in the country because they're just so different in some of their skill sets. Unfortunately, Malusi will be done for the year. And this was supposed to be his last year of college football. He will kind of have the opportunity, if he'd like it, to come back for I think what would be a sixth year. Originally a transfer from Clemson, but yeah, he got pretty severely hurt, lower body injury at Purdue, I believe that was, and yeah, that was a tough blow. Not only on the field, but like Mordecai, he was a pretty big leader for the Wisconsin team.
Yeah,
and I understand that even though Jackson Aker only had 2 carries against Illinois, that people were impressed with him once Malusi went down, that he could be a bit of a change-up back.
Yeah, I think that Akers got the size and the skill set. I think what's just a little bit interesting is, he and Braylon Allen are both kind of power backs, whereas Malusi, he could catch it out of the backfield. Maybe not speed necessarily, but he's fast, but certainly kind of more of a dynamic option. Whereas Aker and Allen are similar. But I do think he can absolutely play at this level. I just think there's a lot of kind of trust and confidence in Braylon Allen right now, not only kind of from what he's done already in his career, but, Coach Luke Fickell has not been shy about saying Allen's really shown Fickell and the staff something the last couple of weeks, even though it's this air raid offense. And I think Allen has 54 carries, like combined the last 2 weeks. He had about 30 at Illinois, just under 150 yards. So he's somebody that has played a lot of college football, but doesn't seem to be slowing down by any means for this Badgers team.
Steve and I have both dealt with Luke Fickell over the years. I'm just wondering your perspective, your thoughts on him, your first year there, and what have you seen from him and his, I guess, ability to create a resilience for in this program that maybe was missing?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. It's Fickell's first year here, and it's actually my first on the beat. I went to school here, so I'm very familiar with the program, and I think you have to kind of be here and be covering to really understand. Some things got a little bit maybe stale, not with Fickell, but before that, just in terms of whether it was some schemes or maybe not as much juice in recruiting or even some of the fan support. I mean, I'm around it now every day, and it's certainly kind of been raised by Fickell and this recruiting staff and really everybody. What I think he does so well, and obviously Paul Christ, Coach Leonard, and the previous staff did a great job for many years. I just think, things slow down at times, and that happens in college football. But what Luke Fickell and the staff do, I think, again, it's off the field. The recruiting has been some of the best Wisconsin has ever seen. And on the field, it just seems like his energy levels with the team at practice, going into games, I think those are very high. I think he's assembled a terrific staff. And I think you're seeing, it's not linear, but just about every week kind of progression in some areas that maybe needed improvement. Like the defense got off to a bit of a slow start early on, I think specifically against Washington State, Georgia Southern, some of my first games on the beat. But recently, I just saw the statistic yesterday, Wisconsin, I believe for the last month or so, has been top 10, along with Ohio State, along with Michigan, like you mentioned, in the least amount of points per drive allowed defensively. And I think that kind of matches the eye test. I think Fickell, obviously, plenty of a defensive background that you've seen at Cincinnati. Coach Tressel, I think that unit's been really good. And I think it's something Steve and I agree when we kind of did some of our preview stuff this week, that's probably more of the strength of this Wisconsin team right now, a little bit ahead of the offense.
Nick, we heard
different
so
kind
much
of style, different style between Luke and Paul Christ. Just a smidge.
Yeah, yep, definitely. And again, I covered Coach Christ and that staff when I was a student here. So I think, you've seen some terrific years, but it's just so much is changing in this game, whether it's college football, college basketball, the NCAA as a whole. And I think that Fickell's somebody that's very, with the times. I think while he still has that energy, from my experience, he's still really good at connecting with people. Something I really like to see in a head coach. I was previously at Iowa State with Matt Campbell. That's something he's obviously very good at. So I think that's something that's really important in this day and age. And whether they win or not, or this week, I think that the trajectory for this Wisconsin program is back on the path it should be, kind of going that way.
And I think that's what took some of us off guard when Paul Christ was let go, is that even though we consider Wisconsin a roughly top 15 player nationally, that although the standards are high and they expect to compete for Big Ten championships, that they're rather conservative, that it's just maybe that the on the field product translates to the rest of the program. And as long as Paul Christ is winning 70% of his games, and even though they were coming off a down 7-6, of course, that's not going to get a coach fired. But yes, I was impressed with the just analysis of the changing landscape, and we need to upgrade and we need to get better. And this league is changing for newcomers at that point too. And maybe they knew more about others headed in this direction from the West Coast. And hey, to stay with the times and compete, we're going to have to upgrade and, galvanize this program. I did want to transfer that to the talk during the offseason about the updated offense, change in offensive philosophy with Phil Longo. How has that taken hold? And has there been an analysis of, okay, well, we want to do this eventually, but we've got this personnel and we're going to have to merge the two. I see an increase in pass attempts, it seems, even when they don't have to, but how does that look on the field?
Yeah, it looks and feels like it's Air Wisconsin now watching them play.
Yeah. I think that was a really good question. I think last week against Illinois was the first time I've really seen kind of this recognition that, look, we want to get to this full air raid. This is kind of our future here under, Fickell and Longo. But we've still got a top, I'm being conservative with this one, top 8 to 10, 12 top running back in the entire country. Many people think he's higher. I think his ceiling is pretty high. But, I think with the new quarterback in Braden Locke and then Braylon Allen in the backfield, I think they leaned on that run game a little bit more, Mark, which I think was really beneficial and obviously helped lead them to a win. I think long-term, it's certainly going to be more of what you maybe saw in that Iowa game, kind of in the 40s for pass attempts and maybe like teens or 20s for the run game. But I was impressed. I wrote about it a little bit Saturday, and I think he's gotten a lot of credit. Phil Longo, he made some play calls in that fourth quarter. I don't know how much you guys got to watch, but like most OCs wouldn't maybe call a, just kind of a halfback power on 3rd and 10 when you need to score and just kind of trust Braylon Allen, or, a kind of a trick play to win the game, just a pass to an offensive lineman, kind of lined up outside as a tight end for the game-winning catch. So I think that he's starting to be more comfortable. I think there's a recognition of the personnel, and I think it's something that's a work in progress long-term when you change so much overnight, but I think it's headed in the right direction.
Steve, Tony, anything else?
Just your basic thought, I suppose, to put you on the spot. It's Ohio State's favored by 2 touchdowns in this game. And, Ohio State can take this one of two directions. They can either go up there and throw their helmets on the field and be in a 4-quarter game, or they can go up there and play like they're capable of, like they did against Purdue and did for a good part of the Penn State game, and take control of the game and dominate the game. I think it can go one of two ways. I've seen undefeated Ohio State teams lose there in 2003, 2010. They were number one in the country in 2010 and lost there. Then the last two times they've been there, 2012, 2016, the game went to overtime. So it's always seemingly a tough game, and one that Ohio State has to struggle to win a lot of times. Do you see a double-digit win for Ohio State, like the spread, the odds makers are saying, or what's your feeling having watched Locke for a game and a half? Is he good enough to keep them in this game for the duration?
Yeah, but what's really interesting about this matchup, Steve, and again, I think you'd kind of agree from some of what we've written. I think the defense is the strength for each team, quite honestly. And I know that's a little bit crazy to say for an Iowa State or for an Ohio State team that I believe, Marvin Harrison Jr., arguably the best player in the country, not just wideout. Obviously they've got 4- and 5-star talent, but I think McCord's been good. I don't think he's CJ Stroud, Justin Fields, guys before him. That defense looks incredible. I think the Badgers defense has been really good. So I understand why the spread is kind of around there, but just because, some of the wackiness, like you've mentioned, Steve, that happens here in Madison, specifically night games, I do think that Ohio State is the better team for sure. I think they're beatable. I think that Braden Locke showed me a little something. So while I'm not going as far as saying, I think the Badgers get this upset, I do think this is really going to be within 7 to 10 points, at least for the first 3 to 3.5 quarters. I could see kind of Ohio State maybe getting that one extra stop, and then, the best player on the field, Marvin Harrison, just maybe dominates. But I need to look a little bit further. How can Braylon Allen run against this team? Does Braden Locke kind of get the ball out quickly to his weapons? How's the O-line? I see this being a good game, though. Maybe not overtime, but I think you're in for another close one, Steve, here in Madison.
I'm ready. Hey, this is one of the top 2 or 3 environments in the Big Ten. I think Penn State is 1, Wisconsin is 2. I can't really rate Ohio State because I go there so often. I'm just kind of thinking more in terms of the other places that we go. I think Ohio State would be in the top 3 or 4, particularly for a big game. Ohio State's good. Nebraska would also be up there. Those are my top 4. But Penn State is clearly number 1, I think, for, the big game for, to go on the road and try and go in there. And I think Wisconsin is right there, neck and neck with them. And, then Michigan and Iowa maybe in the next tier. And then everybody else is well off that pace. I think you got 6 halves and the rest are all just kind of But, I'm first time we've been there since 2016, so I have to remember my way around Madison this weekend. And I posted a question on their message board at Wisconsin site about places to go, and they had some good suggestions. So we'll see if we can look into some of that.
Nick Osen,
I was just going to say, I'm kind of born and raised here, basically. So any other questions, Steve, you got me. And it was fun kind of with the board. I look forward to meeting you. I appreciate you guys.
Yep.
Nick Osen, Wisconsin Badgers, 247 Sports. Buckeye fans, head on over there. Get the other side of this matchup coming up Saturday night. Should be an interesting one. Buckeyes have won 9 straight, but few have been easy. That's for sure. Nick, appreciate you stopping by, breaking things down for us.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, before we say goodbye, we got Yakov here. Appreciate you being here. Yakov says, may I refer to Ohio State's defense as the Scarlet Steel Curtain? You may not, sir. Okay.
That's a great answer, Mark.
They are, and always have been the Silver Bullets. I think that is, it's kind of like Nebraska's black shirts, except for this last 25 years where they have not lived up to black shirt standards. But when they do, that's what they refer to them as the black shirts. And of course, Ohio State even in recent years when they've had some great defenses, they called themselves the Bullets. So, have they reached that status just yet, holding Notre Dame to 14 and Penn State to 12? Maybe.
Steve, what about the scarlet and gray people eaters?
Yes.
The fearsome scarlet foursome and the
85 scarlet and gray bears.
Yes. We could work Doomsday into it. We could go. We could be here all day talking about 70s and 80s.
I gotta
football.
go, guys.
Oh, yes, we do. All right. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate you being here. Of course, catch Tony,
guys.
BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, you got anything else to tell us about what's on tap?
I just wrote about Carnell Tate today, so you can find that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Ryan Day talking about him.
Steve, anything from you that we need to know about?
My chat this week, we had close to 50 questions and 7,000 words of catharsis on everything that is so wrong and so bad about Ohio State football. So, after they beat a top 10 team, everybody's coming out of the woodwork with, well, why didn't we do this? And why can't we do that? So, yeah, that was like a record number of questions. So,
as always, guys, thank you so much. You guys make it happen. We'll see you back next week, everyone.
Yep.